The Arizona and California Railroad operates over 240 miles of track in its namesake states. At Matthey, AZRC trains interchange with BNSF's Phoenix to Williams Junction Peavine, and their road trains head west through Aguila, Wendon, Vicksburg, and Bouse before arrival at the crew change point in Parker. After crossing over the Colorado River Bridge, trains pass through Vidal, Rice, and Chubbuck before reaching Cadiz. The maximum grade on the railroad is 1.6%, track speed is 40 miles per hour, and the main line is single-tracked. The Sonoran Desert west of Phoenix has always been rich with economic promise. After building south from Ash Fork to Phoenix in 1895, Santa Fe interests began to tap into the region to take both advantage of a mining boom in the Harquahala Mountains and as an alternative to the steep grades found on the original Atlantic and Pacific route across Arizona. On September 10, 1903, the Arizona and California Railway was incorporated to build from Matthey to the Needles District at Bengal. ANC surveying crews then laid out a pair of alternatives between Matthey and what would later become Parker. Selecting the southern route, which passed through the sparsely populated Granite Wash Mountains on a 1.6% climb, grading began on March 3, 1904, and track laying commenced 8 months later, reaching Siloam by May of 1905. Mixed train service began in July of that year, and after a delay caused in part by catastrophic flooding elsewhere on the Santa Fe system, construction resumed in October, with major focus being made on the 240.7-foot tunnel at Harkivar. However, even as the tunnel was completed in March 1906, Santa Fe's relative lack of interest in the line was beginning to become obvious. The ANC had always been intended to be the western counterpart to the road's Belen cutoff, but construction crews were drawn away from the Phoenix line to New Mexico, and construction stalled until a year later. Finally, when crews were repatriated to the route, Parker was reached on June 17, 1907. As the chosen point of the ANC's crossing of the Colorado, Parker was the terminus of the railroad for over a year while construction crews worked on the impressive through-truss bridge over the river. While finished in 1908, the bridge was effectively a stub track, while an economic downturn again stalled construction. In September of 1909, grading resumed once more, and after the route's terminus was realigned from Bengal to Cadiz, the line was finally, officially opened on July 1, 1910. Despite Santa Fe's grand ambitions for the line to provide an easier route the same way the Belen cutoff had done a few years prior, the planned construction between Deming and Phoenix to connect the cutoffs was never completed, and the economic potential of the region remained untapped. Thus, the ANC, which was incorporated into the Santa Fe in 1911, was principally used as a shortcut between California and Phoenix. As Santa Fe looked to rationalize its system in the 1980s, the ANC was a prime target for casting off. On March 22, 1991, Park Sierra Rail Group purchased the route, as well as trackage rights into Phoenix from Santa Fe. Park Sierra was acquired by Rail America for $48 million on November 6, 2001, and Rail America was in turn acquired by Genesee and Wyoming on October 1, 2012. Today, the Arizona and California's Green and Cream SD40M-2s have been replaced with G&W Orange-9s, and while traffic levels have dipped in recent years, the character of the bridge route remains firmly intact. Upon arrival in Cadiz, the Arizona and California crew pulls their power down the Y to drop off their Barstow-bound freight in the interchange yard. The tamarisk trees that surround the yard used to provide a windbreak for the two-story depot on the north side of the tracks. The structure had originally been built at Bengal in anticipation of the ANC's arrival, but was moved to Cadiz in 1910, closed in 1967, and demolished in 1970. Today, the only railroad structures left in Cadiz are the water tank and a prefabricated shanty to provide some much-needed shade for the crew switching out the yard. The Cadiz turn pulls into the west end of the yard. Like the ANC train before it, the local train will drop its cars off on the Y before pulling back around to couple onto its counterpart's tonnage. After receiving permission from the dispatcher, the local departs for Barstow. Immediately to the east of Cadiz, eastbounds begin the long climb up to Goffs Summit. For the next 37.4 miles, trains will be in run 8 as they struggle to keep pace up the 1.12% grade, passing through Danby, Essex, and Fenner. From Goffs, eastbound shift into heavy dynamics as they head down a steeper 1.4% grade through Homer, Ibis, Kleinfelter, and Java before reaching Needles. This section of track covers 70.6 miles with a maximum track speed of 70 miles per hour, and the main line is double-tracked CTC to Goffs and triple-tracked CTC to Needles. At Cadiz, trains leave the Cadiz Valley and swing northeast to run between the Ship and Marble Mountains. Unlike Amboy and Baghdad, Cadiz has persisted due to the presence of water. The Cadiz Aquifer is one of the largest known reservoirs of below-ground water in the United States, and in times past has supplied Santa Fe steam engines on both the Needles and Parker districts. Like Owens Lake to the north, plans for tapping into its supplies by Los Angeles Basin interests have ebbed and flowed with the state's water needs for the last 2 decades. Initially, a pipeline to transport water was argued by the federal government to have not needed the Bureau of Land Management's approval due to it being contained within the Arizona and California's right-of-way. However, a 2019 ruling found that the arguments for the pipeline providing a railroad purpose, including operating a fire suppression system and hydropower generation for signals, were not adequate to justify the use of the railroad right-of-way to eschew BLM approval. Despite this, construction has resumed on the pipeline network in 2025 to help supply the incessant thirst of Southern California. Danby is one of the so-called alphabet towns that, starting in Amboy, continued in order all the way to Java, just outside of Needles. Like Cadiz, Danby served as a water stop, but unlike Cadiz, its water came from a spring 5 miles to the northwest. Bonanza Spring sits in the Clipper Mountains and is the only wetland of its type within an 1,000 square mile area of desert. It, like most of the railroad right-of-way east of Pisgah Crater, sits within the Mojave Trails National Monument. Created on February 12, 2016, the monument straddles 2 other preserved landscapes, Mojave National Preserve to the north and Joshua Tree National Park to the south. To the east, the Old Woman Mountains rise above the tracks between Danby and Essex. Until 1906, Essex was known as Edson. It was named for Alfonso Z. Edson, the postmaster at Cadiz. Essex was a base for miners heading up into the Bonanza King mine in the Providence Mountains, one of the richest deposits of silver ever discovered in the Mojave. George Gorman and P. Dwyer discovered the vein in the Providences in the spring of 1880. The claims changed hands a few times before the mine was sold to the Bonanza King Consolidated Mining Company for $200,000. With the arrival of the Southern Pacific in 1883, silver began to be shipped via rail, and by the middle of 1884, the mine had produced nearly $1 million, equivalent to $33 million in 2025. Bonanza boomed as tens of thousands of dollars worth of silver were extracted from the vein, with upwards of 500 people residing in the town adjacent to the mine. A brief work stoppage in spring of that year due to fluctuating silver prices was made worse by a catastrophic fire that July that burned the mine and rendered it unworkable. While a railroad was surveyed out to the site, nothing came of reactivating the claim until 1906. That year, the Trojan Mining Company reactivated the mine, but the company pulled out within a year, leaving the mine again unworked until 1915. Hal Rowaster and Company of Massachusetts reopened the mine and operated it until 1920, and after one last attempt to reopen it in 1923, it was finally closed for good in 1924. The old National Trails Highway crosses over the Needles subdivision on a 1930-built bridge to reconnect with Interstate 40 at the point where the highway crosses the Paiute Mountains. The Paiutes forced the subdivision to travel due north towards the Landfair Valley to circumnavigate the extreme elevation gain that would otherwise be necessary to proceed east towards Needles. Fenner was once an important hub for the carrying of mail via wagon across the Mojave, and when the SP arrived, they used the site as a railhead for supporting silver mining operations in the Old Woman Mountains. The post office here was reopened 4 separate times between 1892 and 1928. Today, Fenner remains the last stop for weary travelers looking for a quick bite to eat before tackling the drive to Ludlow, 60 miles to the west. Unlike its more infamous counterpart to the northwest, Sema Hill, Goffs Hill does not have an extensive history of catastrophic runaways. While this is due in part to the summit's easier gradient, Santa Fe's signaling on the hill in later years also played a role in preventing trains from accelerating to uncontrollable speeds. Santa Fe had previously implemented automatic train control, a system that used both cap signals and automatic block signaling across its main line in Illinois to comply with a 1922 Interstate Commerce Commission order. However, a second order in 1947, which dictated that any line where trains operated faster than 79 miles per hour needed either automatic train signaling or automatic train stop, forced Santa Fe to upgrade the signaling along the Needles line. The road ultimately selected the cheaper ATS for the project. ATS works by mounting small metallic inductors next to the engineer's side of rails at signal locations. These devices, normally inert, are activated by a magnetic shoe mounted to the front truck of an equipped locomotive. As the train passes, the inductor sends a signal to an alarm in the train's cab, which, if not turned off within 10 seconds, forces the train to set its brakes and come to a complete stop. The installation of ATS allowed for the running of heavyweight passenger trains on the Needles line at 100 miles per hour, but the coming of lightweight streamliners reduced their maximum speed to 90. While BNSF upgraded the line to bidirectional signaling in 2003, the ATS system was not included in this upgrade, meaning that Amtrak trains operating across the desert were limited to 79 miles per hour while running on the wrong main. ATS was replaced with positive train control on the subdivision in 2021, which acts as a more advanced, in-cab version of its predecessor. After a long 1.0% climb out of the Cadiz Valley, eastbounds arrive at Goffs, 2,595 feet above sea level. While most trains simply roll through Goffs without a second thought, in times past, the town site was another of the stations supporting the constellation of mining activity in the eastern Mojave. Like the Bonanza King mine in the Providences, the New York mountains to the northwest of Goffs have been a subject of mining fascination for their rich deposits of lead, silver, copper, and zinc. Isaac G. Blake, a Colorado mining mogul, sought to tap into this wealth and provide a railhead for mining activity across the basins north of Goffs. Dubbed the Nevada Southern Railway, work began on a railroad grade from Goffs, which had fittingly been renamed Blake, to the New Yorks in December of 1892. In February of 1893, the right-of-way reached the mountains. Originally named Purdy, the town was later renamed Manville, after Allen Manville, a president of the Santa Fe. After a pause due to the Panic of 1893, work resumed, and in August of that year, trains began running to the campsite of Summit, but traffic levels remained low until 2 major ore discoveries caused a massive surge in revenue for the route. Gold had been discovered by Fred W. Dunn in 1896 in the Searchlight area of Nevada, and after a slow start, the Quartet Mining Company was incorporated in 1899 to tap into the ore found throughout the mining district. Simultaneously, new mining activity was taking place 60 miles to the west. The Copper World mine in the Clark Mountains northwest of Ivanpah was for decades thought to have had potential, but it took until the Ivanpah Smelting Company of Los Angeles purchased the claim in September of 1898 for mining activity to ramp up. Both the Copper World and Searchlight mines would provide a critical traffic base for the Nevada Southern. In 1902, the railroad was extended from Summit into the Ivanpah Valley to better serve the mines in the Clark Mountains. Santa Fe purchased the Nevada Southern later that year and renamed it the California Eastern Railway, but the arrival of the SPLA&SL to Ivanpah in 1905 shifted copper traffic to the new railroad. Thus, while Santa Fe was hesitant to build into mining districts, it nevertheless pivoted its focus towards Searchlight. Incorporated on April 16, 1906, the Barnwell and Searchlight Railway Company finalized grading on its line in November. Manville, which was renamed shortly thereafter to Barnwell, was connected via rail to Searchlight by March of the next year. While the Quartet Mining Company had completed a narrow gauge railroad from the mine to their mill along the Colorado River, the completion of the 23-mile-long Barnwell District marked both the first connection Searchlight had to the national rail network and Santa Fe's first foray into the state of Nevada. It would remain the only one, as after a fire destroyed Barnwell in 1908 and the mine output dwindled, Santa Fe began cutting back service on the unprofitable line. Mercifully, a washout on September 23, 1923, allowed Santa Fe to petition the ICC to abandon the route, and Santa Fe's sole line to Nevada met its end on February 18, 1924. In the meantime, Blake had been renamed Goffs in 1901. The station site served as a loadout for ballast, but this too waned and ceased with the coming of the Depression years. In May of 2005, the California Cultural and Historical Endowment awarded the Mojave Desert Heritage and Cultural Association $500,000 to fund the creation of the Mojave Desert Archives. Construction of the library, which was built to the same specifications as the since-razed 1902 depot, was completed in September of 2008. The archives joined the renovated Goffs Schoolhouse in providing a repository of knowledge for the Mojave Desert, and its location contains thousands of documents related to the history of the region. West Goffs is the western terminus of sections 1 and 2 of the BNSF Triple Tracking Project in the Mojave. By 2016, the grade out of Needles had become a significant bottleneck for westbound traffic, and BNSF began studying the possibility of adding a third main on Goffs Hill. By 2018, the design was completed, and after a lengthy review, our permit was granted in February of 2020. However, the pandemic put construction on hold until 2022. Segments 1 and 2, which covered the 30 miles west out of Needles, required less filling than segments 3 and 4 between West Siberia and East Ash Hill, but the expansion required the construction of over 50 new bridges, 100 culvert extensions, and 3 separate points where existing tracks were cut into the newly built main line. Other line-side infrastructure also needed to be shifted over to accommodate the third track. BNSF employs automated hotbox detectors to scan passing trains for any bearings that fall outside of an accepted range of temperatures. If the infrared scanner picks up an abnormal reading, it will broadcast a radio message telling a train to immediately stop and inspect the hot axle that it's identified. When cutting in the third main, BNSF construction crews needed to move both these detectors and track lubricators as conditions demanded. Triple track lubricators were not commercially available, so crews instead added an additional unit to help keep the new track greased. For westward movements heading across the Seligman subdivision, BNSF dispatchers will keep track of a train's progress up Yampai Hill between Pica and Yampai, which, although significantly shorter than Goffs' 30 miles of 1.4% climb, has an equal gradient profile. In times past, how well a train performed in climbing up Yampai would dictate the order of trains released by the BNSF dispatcher out of Needles, but with the third track construction project, faster westbounds now have the opportunity to expedite their journey up to the summit. Homer once housed a telegraph and train order office, but this was removed in 1912. Today, the site hosts a pair of sidings, making the area a 5-track wide right-of-way. Homer is also the site of a new universal crossover, one that, like Ibis 9.2 miles to the east, allows dispatchers to route trains around slower traffic on their journey up the hill. The alphabetical station naming convention was broken by Bannock's presence on Santa Fe timetables. Founded in 1898 as a passing siding on the 1.4% westbound grade, Bannock is, like Homer, the site of a pair of sidings, one on each side of the main line. In addition to storing maintenance of way equipment, the sidings also serve as locations to set out bad-ordered cars and locomotives. During the summer months, engines flaming out is fairly common, especially with the high temperatures BNSF's ET-44C4s run at. To accommodate this, the team working on the third main track project dug a well at Arrowhead Junction to provide an emergency water supply for keeping trains moving or dousing a burning GEVO. The well was kept after the project concluded and sits at the site of the trailers that used to coordinate construction activities on the hill. Like Klondike, the great separation that starts here was the result of the 1923 double tracking project. From the point where the tracks cross US Highway 95 to Ibis, the two mains are significantly apart as they both make a southward curve towards the Colorado River Valley. The Dead Mountains are the last of the mountain ranges the tracks must curve around before they leave California, and the westbound track, like at Klondike, curves alongside their foothills to create as gentle a grade as possible at this steep rise in elevation. The westbound tracks form the southern boundary of the historic Camp Ibis. The camp was constructed in 1942 as part of General George S. Patton's Desert Training Center. The facility, which had the capacity to house over 10,000 troops, was used to train U.S. Army personnel in desert warfare techniques in the run-up to Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of French North Africa. In October of 1943, the name of the training center was changed to the California-Arizona Maneuver Area to reflect its new purpose. With the Mediterranean theater of operations shifting to Sicily and then to Italy, the facility became a general training camp, and over 1 million Army personnel trained there before it was deemed surplus on March 30th, 1944. The Mojave has long been an ideal training ground for the U.S. military due to its remoteness and the ease the railroads provide for troop movements. Additional CAMA camps along the Santa Fe included Camp Danby, Camp Essex, and Camp Goffs, and when Operation Desert Strike, the largest U.S. military training exercise since World War II, took place in the desert in May of 1964, many of these campsites were reused as unloading points for the 100,000 troops and accompanying material participating in the exercise. Camp Ibis was named after the station of Ibis. Originally known as Ibex, it served as a watering stop for manned helpers on Goffs Hill until its closure in 1928. As freight tonnage waxed and waned throughout the last century, the helper pool at Needles was abolished and re-established, and while DPUs for a while rendered manned helpers irrelevant out of the terminal, they have made a resurgence in recent years. Symboled the KNEE, pairs of GE wide cabs can occasionally be found racing upgrade to assist struggling westbound trains. Kleinfelter was named for Peter K. Kleinfelter, who operated a gold mine in the mountains above the tracks here until legal trouble forced it to close in 1897. Originally, the site was called Sacramento Springs, and after mining operations shut down, Kleinfelter's water remained important for filling Santa Fe's thirsty steam engines. During the time when Camp Ibis was open, troops dug foxholes and other defensive positions in the hills around Kleinfelter to simulate the conditions expected in the Sahara. The curvature of the subdivision increases considerably at Kleinfelter as the tracks begin their final descent into Needles. The gap that the Sacramento Wash forces between the Dead and Sacramento Mountains allows for a natural path towards the river, but the proximity of the wash to the tracks increases the likelihood of catastrophic washouts. Appropriately, the Needles subdivision has one of the highest bridge per mile counts in the entire BNSF system, with at least one bridge per mile providing drainage. Even with them in place, the area between Goffs and Needles is particularly washout prone, and during the summer months MOW crews are kept busy, moving riprap along bridges and clearing out brush underneath culverts to keep the water flowing. Java was once the site of a telegraph and train order office. Before radio communication was introduced on Santa Fe trains, dispatcher instructions to the stations along the district would be delivered via code line strung up alongside the tracks. Passing trains would pick up paper train orders, which would instruct them on how to proceed until arriving at the next office down the line. Until the Java train order office was removed in 1912, its orders would have covered the distance east to Needles and west to Ibis. A brief grade separation was added to the main line at the station site of Khartoum, just west of West Needles, as part of the double track upgrades of 1923. Like the splits at Ibis and West Siberia, the eastbound track eliminates a half mile or so of distance, allowing for trains coasting into town to shave off precious minutes on their journey. Needles was first sighted by colonial authorities when missionary Francisco Garces worked his way up the Colorado River in 1776. The area was named the Needles after a geographic feature to the southwest of the town site, which in turn had been named by Lieutenant Emil Weeks Whipple in 1854 while conducting one of the congressionally authorized Pacific Railroad surveys. A two-story wood depot was built upon the arrival of the railroad and served as the Southern Pacific's headquarters in town. SP, and later Santa Fe, operated an extensive network of support infrastructure across the main track from the depot, including an ice deck and inspection facilities. Like East Tower, an operator in Needles governed train movements in and out of the yard to expedite traffic out of town. Since Goffs Hill starts less than a mile west of the station, allowing trains a good run at the grade was critical for operational efficiency and to prevent stalling, so the yardmaster would be kept busy keeping the main line clear. On September 6, 1906, a fire destroyed the depot, with 2 people tragically losing their lives in the blaze. Like Barstow's depot, which itself would be burnt down 2 years later, Santa Fe spared no expense in building a new, fireproof structure to house their freight agency, hotel, and Harvey House. Opening in May of 1908, the El Garces Hotel cost $250,000 to build, and quickly became a landmark for both its size and the use of the classic revival style, unique in an area where many large stations defaulted to using Mission revival styling. Known as the crown jewel of the Harvey houses, El Garces suffered the same fate as the other Harvey houses along the Needles subdivision, and the restaurant was closed in the fall of 1949. After Santa Fe vacated to move their facilities to another property in 1988, a local group called the Friends of El Garces was formed to pressure the city of Needles into purchasing the station. In 1999, this was accomplished, and in 2013, the city began a $10 million investment to restore the depot to its former glory. The next year, it was opened as a multimodal transportation facility, and in 2016, passenger service was finally restored to the grand old structure when an Amtrak waiting room was opened inside its majestic interior. While the hotel is much quieter than its heyday, Railfans standing on the platform after dark can still bask in the remnants of the station's opulence that cast long shadows on passing trains. In between mainline movements, however, the amber glow of the yard lights highlight the quietness of the facility. Not much work is done, though helpers and occasional bad-ordered units are set out to get light repair on the tracks adjacent to the Y. Today, BNSF train crews wait on the side of what used to be the hotel's east wing to board outbound trains. While the loss of the wing in 1961 is tragic, weary train crews ending their journey from Winslow, Barstow, or Bakersfield are more likely grateful for the parking lot that now occupies the former hotel site. Long pool runs from Bakersfield, which bypass a crew change in Barstow, are especially taxing on crews, as to arrive at this point they will have had to have crossed both Tehachapi Pass and the entire Needles subdivision in their allotted 12 hours. After brief pleasantries, the crews board their trains to once more face the grueling struggle of operating trains across the southwestern desert. As the trains depart the shadows cast by the El Garces, they are tracing the steps of thousands of trains and crews before them, ghosts that offer color and character to what many consider to be an otherwise dull environment. However, if you've been paying attention, the allure of the Mojave and its harshness, its history, and operations just might be calling to you. Maybe someday, we'll see you out there.
Morning sun, a BNSF train charges through Amboy by tank cars and headed towards Cajon Pass. It's like we see the train, and 5 minutes later, another train comes. But that was what we thought. Now we had to wait for a half an hour for another train. Now there are 2 trains coming, both eastbound.
I've been coming out to the desert for a while. Growing up in an extremely loud and busy area like Riverside, it was often hard to find the opportunity to take time and sit. And being in the Mojave, in such a quiet, still environment, was something I desperately needed. To this day, the desert remains peaceful in a way that I can't easily put into words. Having the opportunity to wait for a train, knowing that another one always will come, but knowing that you're in the desert's timetable, not the other way around, is humbling. I've learned over the last few years that to be a Railfan is to be in a constant state of grief for what once was, but the Mojave has remained mostly constant. It's one of the few locations in California that's remained mostly unchanged since I was a kid, and experiencing that continuity spread out over 20 years is soothing. And that quietness and continuity is needed. If I haven't convinced you up until this point to go out to the Mojave, to take time away from your busy life to travel out here, maybe this will do. More than any other place I've ever been in, the Needles subdivision imposes upon those visiting it the mandate to live life at its pace. The video hasn't shown it, but while every trip I've taken out to the desert has been punctuated with huge bursts of train traffic, those in-between points have been filled with suffocatingly hot, still silence. With no cell coverage and nothing else to do, you just have to sit, wait, and think, and even after a while, thinking becomes too hard. It's the closest I've ever come to being in a meditative state while railfanning. It's reinvigorating, just being. As a kid with a lot of noise that I didn't know how to process, I always felt like I wanted to go back there, but didn't realize until I was an adult that it was really the only place that I felt that I could have any internal peace. That's the desert's greatest gift, in my opinion. Not the beauty, not the history, not even the trains, but just the excuse to be so far away from everyone and everything else that you just stop caring and exist. So go out there, take plenty of water, and be prepared to sit, wait, and be. The Mojave will have plenty of gifts to give for those willing to trek into its depths. Thanks for watching.
While this train is headed towards Baghdad, another train is also headed towards Baghdad. We'll capture that, and we already captured the other train. Out in the distance, you can see a little light. Right there, right on the left-hand corner. That's where the train is. That's where the westbound, that's where the eastbound is. With westbound. Here's the other train. Woo! Here's the other train. Hooray! This train has a variety of engines, including a BNSF